Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, automotive enthusiast friends from around the world, it's that time once again. Time for another
appreciative episode of V8 Radio, Kevin.
Appreciative episode. That's a word I can understand.
Yeah, well, it's a word I'm feeling quite a bit of today.
Hey, right on. Well, me too. I'm glad. I appreciate doing this crazy thing, and I appreciate everybody who's actually listening.
Yeah, that's the bonus. People actually listen.
Yeah, a couple of them. So whoever you are, and you know who you are.
You know.
Thank you so much. And we've got a lot going on this episode because I want to chat with you about your recent experiences at the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals. But before we start off on that tangent, those few who enjoy this show regularly have come to rely on us to deliver a couple of automotive trivia questions on this show. Where in the beginning we ask the question and then we bait and switch you and provide the answer at the end as a bribery tactic.
I like the bait and switch.
Yeah. They think they're getting a trivia question and they get an hour full of nonsense instead.
Yeah, we have them right where we want them.
That's right. So have you, Mr. Mike Huball Clarke, our esteemed co-host, have you prepared a suitable trivia question for this episode?
Well, that's up to the listener to decide if it's suitable, but I have certainly prepared a trivia question for today.
What do you got?
And here we go. All right, Kevin, when you hear the name Richard Petty, typically people will automatically envision the 1970 Plymouth Superbird that he drove on the NASCAR track. But did you know that in the 1969 NASCAR season, another manufacturer lured him away from Chrysler, and he drove the 69 in a different car? What manufacturer was that, and what car did he drive?
That is a great question, and I believe he deviated completely away from Mopar, so it wasn't like a Dodge into a Plymouth. It was a totally different manufacturer.
I say nothing.
Right, yeah, thank you. So I narrowed that down. See how I did that? I'm going to come out, and I'm not the world's biggest NASCAR historian, although I just saw Mr. Petty at the SEMA show. I certainly didn't ask him about this.
Well, you missed your opportunity.
I did. I might as well just go home. I'm going to say that he drove a Mercury in '69, and it was a Cyclone, is my guess.
Mercury Cyclone.
Yeah. It was either a Ford or a Mercury, but I'm going to say the Mercury.
Okay. Is that your final answer, sir?
I'm going to say that is, just because I dig those Mercs, and of course we all dig King Richard. So hey, I can't lose.
we all get participation trophies today, Kev.
Yeah, how about that?
We're all winners,
and which I'm very appreciative of that.
Likewise. All right, then. Kevin says Mercury Cyclone for the 69 season. Duly noted, sir. And have you yourself prepared a suitable trivia question for the masses?
I have. Hopefully you'll be all over this one. Yeah. So, according to the published media of the time, what is the quickest production car of the 1980s?
Let's see. 80s was a pretty dismal decade for performance in cars.
There were some standouts.
There were a couple of standouts. I mean, you did have, let's see, you had a ZR1 Corvette, didn't you, in the 80s? Yeah. You had some IROC Z28, but, they had the tuned port 350 injected engine. They were okay, but the one car that really comes to mind as being just off the charts in performance was the Grand National with the turbocharged 3.8-liter V6 that was pulling down 13-second quarter-mile times in stock configuration.
Wow. Mr. Pontiac goes for a Buick.
Goes for the Buick. Well, that was the standout car of the 80s.
You're right. That was truly a standout car, and Is that your final answer?
That, sir, is my final answer.
All right. Well, then I will duly note that. Any particular year or just the Buick Grand National? The question was of the entire decade, so it doesn't really matter. But
right. The
fastest
GNX was the quickest one, I believe. That had a hotter turbo. I don't know if it had a better cam in it or not, but it was quicker than your garden variety, quote unquote, Grand National. Certainly is quite a bit more valuable than a Grand National.
Yeah, one of 547 made.
Yeah. I think they go for six figures at auction in good condition.
Oh, yeah. So you're going to go with the GNX.
Yes, sir.
So that puts you in 1987. 1987 Buick GNX is your final answer. Good answer.
Thank you. Good question.
Crazy thing about that car, I think it was only 245 horsepower.
Yeah, but
they moved.
It sure knew how to lay it down.
345 or 50 foot-pounds. So, yeah. All right. Well, that has been duly noted. And that was a great muscle car of the 80s, and you just got back from the greatest muscle car show in the world.
How about that? I sure did, Kevin. I was at the 11th annual Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals at the Rosemont Convention Center, which is held the weekend before Thanksgiving every year in November. And I was there in place of you because you were in Saudi Arabia during that same time period. And as good as you are, you just couldn't be at both places at once.
Well, I need to clarify that because you probably would have been there anyway, so you weren't like in place of me. Yeah.
Right. Well, I wouldn't have been working in place of you, but
right, this is true. So
I would have been spectating.
It was kind of challenging for me because I obviously wanted to do the show in Saudi, and it just happened to be the same weekend as the MCACN show. And as you know, the MCACN show to me is the greatest, definitely the greatest indoor car show. And as far as car shows, I think it's the best. You know, to me it's the greatest assortment of muscle cars, and the people are what really make that event special. And I think, as you mentioned, this was the 11th year. I've been to almost all of them. Now I've missed two. I think I missed the first one and now this one. So my internal clock is all wonked out, because I'm supposed to be there for that.
Right.
And fortunately, you were able to kind of step up and handle some of the responsibilities that I normally have. So I'm appreciative to you for that.
Well, thank you. That goes both ways. I mean, you trusted me enough to be able to take on that responsibility and, get those interviews and do those unveilings and, be an agent of V8 TV and, do everything that needed to get done on that weekend. And we did it. I mean, Ben and I were there and a few of the other crew members were there as well. They had things to do, and they were doing it. And
that was a huge weekend. So what we need to do, I think, is just let's back up to the beginning and take us through all the stuff that went down that weekend, because you were spinning in a million different directions.
I was.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I was a bit nervous. I went there Friday night. I met the crew there, and I talked to Bob. And he gave me my official unveiling assignments.
Bob Ashton, who runs the show.
I'm sorry, yeah. Bob Ashton, organizer of the show, gave me my unveiling assignments and the times that I needed to be where I needed to be. And I met a couple of the other people who were doing the unveilings. They were there as well, and I met them, and that was pretty cool. So
these were the official unveilings of the show.
Correct, that you could read about on page 30 and 31 of the latest MCACN magazine that comes out a few weeks before the show.
And one of the things that makes that show so special is that a lot of really high-profile restorers will restore cars that are shown to the public for the very first time at that show, and then you were part of the team that was pulling the covers off those for the very first time. So there's a big crowd, there's the owner, there's the restorer, there's a lot of, there's cameras, a lot of pressure there.
A little bit of pressure, and I got my first assignment. The first unveiling started at 9:30, and it happened to be with Scott Hoke from Mecum Auctions, who was unveiling the Bullet Mustang, which is going to be auctioned off at Kissimmee in January.
The Bullet Mustang.
The Bullet Mustang, not a recreation. The car that Steve McQueen drove in the movie.
Yeah.
And side note to that, Steve McQueen tried to buy that car in 1977 off of the family who owned it, and they wouldn't sell it.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think the story says McQueen was a little miffed about that. He wanted that car, but he couldn't get it.
Frickin' Steve McQueen.
Yeah, exactly. He gets what he wants, right?
He gets whatever he wants, except that car.
Except that car. So, I had never done any of these unveilings before, so I was hoping to get a few more spectator sessions under my belt before I went up. And so my first one was 9:45. That was the second unveiling. So needless to say, I'm wound a little tight as it is.
A little bit, but at least you weren't first. I mean, you did have someone to
At least I wasn't first. But as the minutes were approaching, I started getting the same feeling I got the first time I ever went skydiving. So imagine being at the open door of an airplane at 15,000 feet, and every cell in your body is screaming at you, "Do not jump. You're going to die."
Yeah, right. That is the most unnatural thing you can possibly do.
Exactly. And I felt that coming on right before I had to start talking. And I was breaking out into sweat. But once I jumped out of the plane, all of that went away and was replaced with exhilaration and just almost a serenity at the floating feeling that we had. So,
well, at that point, you can't do anything about it. You're in for the ride.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
You're done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So once he said, "All right, go," I started talking, and it felt pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I did my thing. I talked to the owner of the car, which was the owner of the restoration shop that completed this car. It was a 1968 Cougar GTE, which was, the Shelby Mustang Hertz rent-a-cars. Well, this was a Cougar Hertz rent-a-car.
Oh, right on. I didn't even know they did that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, they worked with Shelby and Hertz, and you could rent these Cougars.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty neat.
And being a GTE, was this a 427 car?
I believe it was a 420. It was either 427 or 428. Car.
Yeah, they made a handful of those in 427 top oilers, I believe, and then they made a lot of them as 428s. But that would have been the hottest car you could have rented.
Oh yeah, no doubt, for sure. So once that was done, the weight was lifted.
That's so cool.
And I'm like, all right, I've made this to be such a bigger deal that I needed to make it. It's cool. Don't get me wrong. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
But this is doable. I can do this.
Well, I tried to tell you all that.
I know.
Because I knew you were capable of doing this. And on a grand scale, it really just boils down to being in the moment and chatting with a car guy and talking about the cars, right? And then a whole bunch of people just kind of want to hear what's going on.
Exactly.
So
that's what they want to hear. They want to hear the guy who's representing the car or who owns the car to tell us about the car.
Right. And they're not there to watch you tap dance or play trombone or anything, It's your mission to kind of step aside and facilitate the stories and let it happen.
Exactly.
Right.
You're on the nose. So, and that's what I did. And the rest of the unveilings went really well. They went really smooth. After the Cougar GTE, I unveiled this 1969 Mercury Cyclone spoiler, Dan Gurney edition.
Awesome car.
Which was a really special car. Beautiful color scheme, white with a blue top, just perfectly restored, owned by Marty Burke, and just a beautiful, beautiful car. And he is big into these spoiler cars. Loves them, and he is so happy to have this. I asked him what his plans were for this car. He's like, "This is going to my collection, and it is never leaving."
Right on.
I said, "All right, good deal."
So, just kind of dawned on me, reflecting on the GTE Cougar, of course, the Shelby Mustangs were the GT350H cars because of Hertz rental car. If the Cougar, technically that was a GTEH, or like the Canadian version, a Cougar GTA. GTA.
Take off, nice.
And then you move on to the Dan Gurney Cyclone spoiler. And that was a 69, right? And in 69,
Correct.
They did a couple of those. They did the Dan Gurney version in blue, and there was also the Cale Yarbrough version, which was the red stripe.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what
they didn't have a Cale Yarbrough car there, just the Dan Gurney car.
That's all.
Yeah, just only the Dan Gurney.
Yeah, we'll talk about a couple of true American legends. Dan Gurney, of course, is one of my all-time heroes, and Cale Yarbrough, one of the winningest NASCAR drivers ever, and a super great guy. In fact, we recently, a couple years ago, we had a guy bring us a Cale Yarbrough spoiler to possibly restore, and we didn't get into the car, and he had a family scenario come up. I think he was getting divorced, so he couldn't put the funds into the car at the time, and it was a weird one. It was a 351 two-barrel column shift automatic car.
Wow.
And you would think those swoopy Cyclones would have been bench seat or bucket 4-speeds.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely a factory freak. Without a doubt.
We think it was probably one of the only ones, one or two.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah. So you were super strong on Mercury, first couple cars out of the box, so that must have been
yeah, that was cool because I don't really get into Mercuries all that much. And to learn a little bit more about these cars was really cool to learn and really educational for me. But then I went right into where I belong, which was unveiling a 1969 Ram Air 4 Firebird.
Awesome.
Done. Oh, beautiful. Done in carousel red. Had the color-coordinated steel wheels with the poverty caps. Beautiful, beautiful car. Black interior. Just so well done.
And those hubcaps, do they say PMD on them? Are they like the? Do you remember? Are they the ones with the little turbine kind of fin-looking things?
I don't think they said PMD on there. I'd have to. I don't remember. I took some pictures of it. I'd have to look at those.
Yeah, there's a lot of great pictures of the MCACN show floating around. Our friend Brad Miles takes 10 zillion, and Tim Costello, and there's a bunch of guys that take a lot of pictures. And I was living vicariously through all those photographs online. And then, of course, there's some videos coming out. But so that Ram Air 4 Firebird was a hardtop, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No vinyl top, just painted all over.
Beautiful.
And I believe it was a 4-speed car. I'd have to look again. Unfortunately, I don't remember if it was a bench seat car or not.
Yeah. It could have been either way. I mean, those Ram Air 4 Firebirds are really, really cool. And I remember being at MCACN a couple years ago. There's a silver Ram Air 4 400 convertible in the Brothers collection. I think that's one of 12. And Gary Riley from Level 1 had brought out a green convertible as well a few years ago.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But any of the Ram Air 4 cars, the only bummer about the MCACN show is they couldn't start it up because of the fire laws.
Oh, right.
To get to hear that cam.
Yeah, we needed to hear that Ram Air 4 cam lope a little bit. That'd have been great.
And who was the restorer on that one?
That was from American Muscle Car Restorations out of Rhode Island.
That's Mike Mancini and his team,
yes,
right?
sir.
Yeah.
Mike Mancini. He's the one who represented the car. The owner was a little bit camera shy. So Mike stepped up and represented it and told us all about the car during the unveiling.
Or
of course, he knows everything about it.
Maybe.
So, what's that?
He might have been cue ball shy.
Yeah, maybe. I got a face only a mother could love.
Yeah. Well, now in years past, Mancini's team, their setup is pretty cool because he typically brings a lift and you can, walk under the car and stuff. Did he do that again?
He did that this year, yeah. The car was on a big 4-post lift, and during the day he had it lifted up, and you could walk underneath it and check everything out and see the level of detail that they achieve with their restorations, and it's quite something.
It's amazing. They do amazing work. Yeah, totally. Awesome. Okay, so you got the 2 Mercuries, and you got the Ram Air 4 Bird. Was that the end of your unveiling session, or are we have more to go?
That was not the end of my unveiling session. I had one more at high noon, and that was a really special 1970 Buick GS Stage 1 car that is owned by a gentleman named, I know you would like it.
They're all very
special.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, the reason why this one is special is the story that goes with it, and it's owned by a gentleman named Joe Guzek, who is the original owner of this car.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And he worked for a wheel company that supplied wheels to Buick. So he had a reel in with Buick. He got this, he ordered this GS Stage 1, and he was able to get it painted a Cadillac-only color called Cinnamon Fire Mist.
Wow. Oh, man, that must have looked awesome on that car.
It looked beautiful. It was really something.
That Cinnamon Fire Mist is it's like a Sunset Horizon orange almost.
Exactly.
But with a lot of pearl and metallic in it.
Mm-hmm.
What color was interior? Please say white.
Black.
Oh.
I think it was black.
Even so. White would have, for me, that would have been.
Oh, white would have been it.
Yeah, but black, I'm sure, was still standing tall.
Yeah, it was. Ooh. So the thing, Joe was able to get a set of Spider wheels for it and had them widened to fit wider tires in there. Mm-hmm. He street raced this car all up and down the streets in Detroit and put it up in 1979 with the idea of restoring it after he retired. So throughout his career, he was collecting a bunch of OEM parts, squirreling them away with the car, stashing them away, and just doing this. Well, unfortunately, a few years ago, he had a stroke.
Oh.
Pretty bad stroke. And it left him confined to a wheelchair. His left side of his body is kind of weak. His speech was impaired. So he kind of realized, he's like, I'm never going to get my car restored.
Oh, man.
And he kind of resigned himself to the fact that it was never going to happen. Well, Joe happens to be a part of this group of guys called the W31 crew. And they deal with the Oldsmobiles W31s. And our good friend Ryan Weaver, who you talked to, you featured him on the last year's MCACN After Hours live show. We got to know him.
Good dude, Ryan.
He's part of this crew. Yeah, and this crew gets together, and they were talking about this GS. They're like, man, whatever happened to that car? It was so cool. And they found out that Joe still had it. But they also found out that he was never going to get it restored. Well, these guys decided to take matters into their own hands. They took the car and all of its parts, they took it to a restoration shop, and they pooled their resources, and they got this car restored for Joe.
Wow.
So he could have it back. And that's the car we unveiled at MCACN.
That is just so awesome.
Oh, it's why you get into cars with people like that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, and man, I've got chills. That is awesome on so many levels. Being a guy who runs a restoration shop and knows how challenging it is for one person to go through a restoration, never mind getting a bunch of people together to manage that. And so they contributed financially to this as well, I'm guessing.
Yes.
You know,
yes, they did.
They didn't just haul it over there. They helped pay for
Correct.
it. Wow.
Exactly.
And I'm guessing you can't do that without the owner knowing.
Right. Yeah, Joe knew.
But still.
What a tribute.
That is a fairy tale.
Yeah. And Joe was able to be there at the show, too. So he got to see it.
Oh, right on.
We got to talk to him. He said something. He says, I hope these guys don't all come collecting on me at once, or I'll be in debtor's prison forever.
Yeah, I bet. So even though that car was only 9 years into its life cycle when it kind of got parked, if you said it got parked in 79, it was street raced and probably beat up pretty hard. And cars in Detroit, you know, they live a rough life, a lot of salt, a lot of potholes. So, did you have any insight on what kind of shape it was in before the restoration? Did they talk about that at all?
I didn't hear what kind of shape it was in.
I'll have to look that up and see if there's pictures. That W31 club is a bunch of really good guys, and they kind of have, what I'll call their unofficial annual meeting at MCACN. There's usually a bunch of them there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's probably 15, 20 of them that were there.
That is
and
so
I talked
great.
to those guys. Yeah, they were real sweethearts. I talked to them before the unveiling, and they were just, so happy that this was able to come to be able to do that for Joe. And they must think a lot of him to do that for him. So, it's a good crew, great crew.
Totally, that's super cool. Yeah, that's what you want, is to be like you said, the hobby or sport or whatever you want to call it. In situations like that, really brings out the best in people, and I'm gathering that Joe was probably a guy quick to lend a hand to anybody along the way, and it all came back to him.
Must have been, yeah, totally. Yeah. That karma just came back and just bit him in a good way.
Yes, right. So cinnamon fire mist, what a great color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
especially being a Cadillac only color, you couldn't even get it on that car.
Right, exactly. Yeah. His is the only one, and it's official. It was painted at Buick, that color.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what that trim tag said. I know some of the, like the GSX cars, the trim tag says QQ on it, and that's a special color. The first 70 Riv I ever had, I'm such an idiot for letting that car go, by the way. I'll tell you, that one was painted in fire red, which was a GS color, and it was not available on Rivieras.
Really?
And it was special ordered with the white gut, and I didn't know that when I had gotten rid of it. I only found that out a couple years ago.
You know what? You're an idiot for letting that go.
Oh no, it's all good. It's all good.
I have a few cars I'm an idiot for letting go, but you're in good company, my friend.
Yeah. So now we're talking what? We're at just after noon.
Correct.
In your unveilings.
Mm-hmm. And then I worked with Ben. That was the last unveiling I had to do. And then we had to get to work for Mr. Ostie here. And there was a few interviews we had to get. We talked to Gary Riley a couple of times. On one was that 70 Daytona Charger. Mm-hmm. That was just on this last muscle car of the week.
Yep.
And we also talked to him about this Boss 429, which was KK 1213, which is thought to be the earliest Boss 429 Mustang that was released to the general public.
Yes. Both of those are super amazing cars, and it's pretty cool. So you went from doing the public unveilings to instant TV producer,
right?
Working with Ben, our cameraman who works for us, and editor and producer, to do some episodes of Muscle Car of the Week. And again, I wasn't there, and those, you and I had worked together a little bit on trying to get you those cars ahead of time. Most of those were Brothers Collection cars that they had just gotten finished, and public debuts again at the MCACN show for most of those. And so you got to be the guy behind the camera then, and asking questions and pulling interviews. And so far, we've aired two of those. The first one was your interview with Bob Ashton. Mm-hmm.
That went real well.
Yeah,
he's good at that.
Oh yeah, that's his thing. Yeah. Bob he's not good at it; he's great at it. And what I like about one of the things I like about that whole show experience is there's no BS. That show is the real deal. Mm-hmm. So there's no Batmobile and General Lee and Fast and Furious display. It's only, significant and legit cars. And of course, they also have car clubs and they have, some modified stuff, but none of those are gimmicky either. It's all
correct
for true enthusiasts.
Yeah.
And Bob runs that show with a committee of 7 other gentlemen, and they are all dyed-in-the-wool, legit car guys. They're not there saying, hey, if we put some trapeze artists in over here, we can make an extra $500 this weekend. They are there to put on the world's best show. And when you talk to Bob about it, he's very protective of that show. And he's got swagger when he's talking about that show.
Sure.
He knows
the show
knows what he brought.
He does. The show is so pure in nature. I mean, it's muscle cars, legit, real deal, street pounding, desirable muscle cars. I mean, and I was talking with a few people, and a lot of people agree. You can go to a Pontiac only show, and you can see some really cool Ram Air 4 stuff. Maybe somebody has a Ram Air 5 car, and you can go to a Ford show. Maybe somebody has a Cyclone. Maybe somebody has a Talladega. Or like a Chrysler show, someone's got a Superbird or whatever. But only at MCACN does it all come under one roof, and a lot of it. I mean, it's like 500 cars there.
Yeah, it's huge.
Of the super rare, desirable, high-end muscle cars.
And every year, so for 11 years straight, it's been a different show.
Yep.
Which is remarkable to be able to get these top echelon cars year after year in their theme and invitational displays, one of which was the wing car display, and that's when you talked to Gary about that Hemi Daytona, which is the second video that we aired.
Yep. That was a funny story that Gary said about the first owner of that car, and how he was involved in a few improprieties, and
yes, well, Gary
and woke up dead in the field.
Yes. and Gary, if you didn't know him, you would think he was more of like a banker than a muscle car guy. He's very, very refined. He's very reserved. He's very articulate. He doesn't get, really wound up about anything. And he's telling us this story in the video about how this guy may have been into drugs and done some improprieties,
Well, and unfortunately for him, he was found dead in the field.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a great
how
story.
About that?
And the story kind of matches the car because the car is insane.
Oh yeah.
Now, it was hard for me to tell in the video. Do you know if it was Hemi orange or was it more red?
It was Hemi orange.
Yeah, it looked like it.
Oh,
and it was on dog dish caps with white pinstripe tires, which I thought were awesome.
That is legit, man. That is correct.
Yeah, and so that car, that's the one feature that has gotten people wound up online is the white pinstripe tires, and a lot of people think they were like, the originals blew out, so they went to Montgomery Ward's and bought some, road handlers or something, or whatever they were. But that was the tire that was spec for the car. So that's cool that he stayed true to that and resisted putting a red line or something else on it.
What I'm really happy it wasn't on there was a set of BF Goodrich radial TAs.
Yeah, he knows not to do that for sure.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
An option might have been a Goodyear raised white letter.
Oh, true.
Like well, I think all the Hemi cars had 15-inch wheels, so it would have been a 15-inch raised white letter Goodyear. But at the same time, those guys are all about correctness. And when you have a car that's super rare like that with a factory Hemi, you don't really deviate.
True. I mean, that's funny you say that. I have a picture of my father's first 65 GTO that he bought brand new, and it had white stripe tires on it. So that was a real thing.
Oh yeah,
that was an option. That was you opted for that. It wasn't just what came with it. You could have got the red line, you could have got the white stripe, or just black wall tires.
Yeah, and I think my armchair quarterback $2 guess here is that the white stripe tires kind of fell out of favor once they kind of saturated. So they originally started off on the luxury cars. Of course, the Cadillac had the Vogue tire with the white and the gold.
Oh, right.
My 70 Riv had a white stripe tire. It was actually a double white stripe. It's two.
Oh, nice.
And that was the factory issue tire. But I think eventually they put them on everything, Pintos to station wagons, and people were just like, they weren't getting it. And that's when, in the 70s, you had the Pro Tracks, and you had, the Mickey Thompson tires came out in the 80s, right. and of course the BFGs like you're talking about. So those were the more desirable ones. So it became a raised white letter thing, like you're saying. And then it feels like only fairly recently were good red lines reproduced. And everybody kind of flocked to those. And now it's like, well, if the car came with the white pinners, let's do those again. And they don't offend me.
They don't offend me either.
Yeah, they're cool.
Yeah, for sure. Gosh, what else did we do there? Oh, we had another special. Actually, there was a fifth unveiling.
Oh,
that we did at the show, and that was an official unveiling. But that was for the recently, and I mean recently, completed blue Tyrol Blue 67 GTO that we've talked about on this show a few times.
Yep.
And I've been coveting for quite some time.
You and me both.
And that car got finished Thursday night before the show.
Yeah.
And I mean, finished. I mean, all the final assembly, all the adjustments, everything was finally done. And it was brought to the show, and the owners, Janet and Jerry Hilsenbeck, came out to see it for the first time. We had a nice car cover on it, and we did our own little production on there, and we introduced them when they uncovered the car, and they were blown away by the level of detail that car showed, and how beautiful that car was.
Well, thank you for that.
Really
that
pops.
That was really awesome. And that car, like you said, we've been talking about it for a while. That was restored by our team at the V8 Speed and Resto shop.
Yeah.
And this was, you can imagine, you had your stress level of doing, stepping outside of your, I don't want to say your comfort zone, but your familiarity zone, doing something different, and especially in public. Well, Kelly and I were literally on the other side of the planet. Mm-hmm. And it just turned out that this beautiful blue GTO was getting finished right around the time of the MCACN show, and the owners are native to the Chicagoland area. So we thought, hey, why not see if we can get this car unveiled, or at least presented or on display at the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals. And I knew we couldn't do one of the official unveilings because those are locked up months and months in advance. But we thought it'd be fun and a nice experience for the owners if we did our own kind of unveiling. And I really appreciate you putting the effort in to help that happen. And our crew, as you were mentioning, they were darn near working on this car in the trailer on the way up to Chicago.
Yeah.
Trevor, I guess, our guys, Trevor, Tyler, and Mike, and Jeff, and Tim, and Brett. I think
John.
Oh yeah, Jonathan Clemens.
John was up. Yep.
All went up there to be a support network. Trevor and Tyler had the truck and trailer, and they booked out first, and then Ben came up, of course, for the video side. But you were telling me that I didn't know this because I think they wanted to save our sanity a little bit. We were in communication with those guys, but not to the same degree you were. Literally, a few hours before, that car was still partially disassembled before they left.
Well, that's the MCACN thrash.
Yeah. And
like you said, like we've said before, you don't wait till the last minute, but you take every minute available to you.
Right. Chip, your buddy
they
Chip
literally
Fruce said
did.
That.
Fruce said that. That's right.
And, in specific, some of the things that they were still working on is when you do a restoration like that, and that car was bad when it came in. It was a mess. It looked like it got dragged out of a lake. I mean, the bottom was all rusted, and it was in a brown primer, and parts falling off and everything. So extensive metal work happened, and body and paint and trim restoration, interior. That's one of the first cars that we have done the full interior on custom in our in-house.
Is that right?
That our interior shop did, yeah. So there was a lot of work going into it, and as that deadline was creeping up, they didn't get a chance to really drive it much. And it threw us a couple of curveballs before Kelly and I left to go out of town. I think it was actually before SEMA. Trevor was driving the car, and it bent a couple push rods. Did you hear that story?
I did hear that story. Yeah. That broke my heart nearly.
So it was a situation where it had a bad guide plate in a couple of cylinders, and the push rod wore funny, and it wore a ridge in the side of it, and it hung up and stuck on the guide plate and bent the push rod. So luckily, so the engine was already rebuilt before it came to us. Granted, it was rebuilt in the 80s, but it only had about 1,000 miles on it.
Gee whiz.
And it had been sitting, and whoever rebuilt the engine used a mismatch of guide plates. So
really?
When our guys were doing the forensic disassembly on this thing, they're trying to figure out what happened, because there was, the push rods were all the same length, and the rockers were the same ratio, and the compression was the same all the way across. And I think either Mike Bess, our mechanic, or Trevor flipped over the guide plate and noticed some of them had part numbers on them and some had different part numbers on them.
Oh,
and they were from different manufacturers, and that was the issue. So that pushed everything back, and it reduced the drive time as they had to wait for parts. And in the 23rd hour, I guess, they were trying to get a few more miles on this car, and it was getting hot, and they'd already done the standard Pontiac tricks of clearancing the water pump to that little backing plate, the impeller, and it had an aluminum radiator in it and all this stuff. And they were adding more fans to it and making a new fan shroud and changing the thermostat around, everything they could do, but they got it and got it loaded. The day before, I did see pictures after the fact, both doors were off the car because the hinges had worn out just during the assembly process, which sounds ludicrous, but the way this stuff goes, when we build a car, we put a set of new hinges on it or rebuild the originals, and we resist the urge to lubricate them so that they will accept paint. If you lube up the hinges during the metalwork process and forget about all that, the whole pillar and structure will get a thin film of oil on it, and then when you're in the paint booth, you'll have problems. So they've been using kind of like a dry dust graphite type lubricant, which apparently wasn't enough, and the bronze bushings chewed up, and all of a sudden the door didn't fit right.
Oh boy! After
it was all assembled, So these are some behind-the-scenes stories of what happens on these type of restorations that nobody plans for, and nobody did.
Right.
Nobody had a failure of procedure or anything. It's just, as my dad used to say, SH, which is an acronym for stuff happens.
Stuff happens.
Right.
Exactly.
Stuff happens. But they got it all together. They got it up there, and like you were saying, apparently our friends the Hilsenbecks were pretty jazzed about seeing it.
Yeah, in fact, they were so jazzed, we actually did the unveiling twice because
right on.
Janet and Jerry showed up there in the morning, and we did the unveiling. Unfortunately, the rest of the family wasn't able to be there until later in the afternoon. So we decided they were coming. We covered the car back up. When they showed up, we did the second unveiling just for them, and they were just as blown away by the car as Janet and Jerry were. And there were three generations there. Janet and Jerry, their kids, and their grandchildren were there. And the grandchildren had shirts made that said, "Grandpa, give me a ride in your '67 GTO."
Right on.
Yeah, and they're climbing all over the car and just loving it. Oh yeah, it's their car now.
Yeah, your OCD must have been going insane.
I did not like that, but kids are going to be kids, and it is what it is. So at the end of the day, it is just a car, and let them play.
They do have a big family, and it was really cool to see them all out there, and it was nice of you guys to pull that cover. And also, you enlisted your buddy Paul Weinstein and some of the Cruisin' Tigers Pontiac Club to come hang out.
Yes, we sure did. They got to see the unveiling, and in fact, they stepped up and they presented to Jerry a complimentary club membership to the Cruisin' Tigers All Pontiac Club, and he's so all cool. Official now. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a great community. People come together, and they want people to have a great experience, and they certainly did. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better time to see your car for the first time after it's been gone through a restoration.
Yeah.
I think.
Could you imagine, all these people that you don't know, and then they'd be at that show, and no doubt other people that were just walking by were digging the car because, it looked like jewelry in that building.
It drew a tremendous crowd around it throughout the day.
Yeah, that's
people
so great to
loved
hear.
it. They loved it.
Yeah.
What I really loved about it was you mentioned that the interior was done in-house. The seats were not done in a traditional 67 GTO pattern.
They were actually a Chevelle pattern.
But they look great in that car. They really look dynamite.
Well,
they really look good.
The car is, kind of technically a Resto mod because it has its numbers matching 400 and turbo 400 transmission. I believe it's the original motor, but it's got a Phytech fuel injection system on it. It's got a BMR suspension, tubular suspension setup. It's got four-wheel disc brakes. It's got vintage air. It's got a Dakota dash. And then the seats were done differently. And part of that was, I think there might have been a twofold story there. One, I think the availability of the 67 pattern for GTO seats was like on unobtainium back order.
Oh, wow.
And what the car is supposed to look like. That pattern goes vertically the long way up and down the seat. It's got a stitch in it. But the Chevelle stuff was available, and our team looked at it and discussed it with the owner. The Chevelle pattern goes horizontally, but it matches the door panels of the GTO.
Exactly. It really tied in nicely with the rest of the 67 interior.
So it wasn't very offensive. They're the same buckets, the same guts for either car. So I thought that was kind of a neat thing, and only a few people caught that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know they were Chevelle seats, but I knew they weren't a stock pattern.
Right.
For GTOs, but it didn't bother me a bit. If it works, it works.
The real wild ones were like the 65, where they went on an angle.
Oh yeah. Those are cool too.
Yeah. So, this was a modified car, but the cool thing is at the MCACN show, so we had the car judged, and we entered it in that modified class, which means they're not looking at 100% concourse correct, because obviously you can do some modifications. But the car scored really, really well. It scored, what was it, 997 out of 1,000?
997 out of 1,000.
Yeah. So, and in that case, so how do you score a modified car? You really look at the car versus itself. It wasn't that car versus another GTO that was there or whatnot. And the judges look at the level of detail, the quality, the fitment, do the parts kind of fit in harmony? I mean, we had a custom firewall in that thing, a handful of stuff. So for the judges to say, hey, 997, what that's telling you is that the team cared 100% from the beginning to the end of the planning stages to the execution to the fit and finish, all the way across. That car is just about the best that it could be in the minds of those judges. So that's really, really cool.
It's super cool. I mean, and it was so well executed. Everything fit so nice together. The gaps were great. It was very nice.
Well,
Cue Ball approves.
I'll be sure to pass that along.
Well, I'm sure they know, because I was drooling all over it the whole weekend.
Yeah. Well, and again, we're very, very fortunate that our team really cares about this stuff, and they love doing it. And one thing that was pretty interesting on that particular car is that, for the most part, I think everybody that worked on it when it arrived in our shop was there when it was unveiled.
That's amazing.
Because it was like a couple of years, it was a long project. And that's a testament to the team, because we don't have a lot of turnover. We've added a few positions, and we've had, one or two leave, but for the most part, I love the fact that the guys who dragged it off the trailer were the ones that, were there when the cover got pulled, because too many times, Kelly and I will be the ones that go to events, and we'll take a car there, and everybody will be, gushing over how great this car is, but the people that actually worked on it aren't there. They're not there to get that afterglow and get all the accolades and the pats on the back. And sometimes it shows that are real close to us, weekend stuff or whatnot, we can do that. But when you're at an event that is a high-level show like the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals, just to be in that building is something else.
Oh, yeah. That's an achievement.
Yeah. And then to actually unveil the car, have happy owners, have happy reception, and then to score all that, knowing that, your two hands were a big part of making that happen. That was a win every way possible.
Home run, grand slam home run every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. That was so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And over the years, we've been fortunate that, so I think that's the fourth car that we've had judged at the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals, all of them in modified classes. And that I think is the highest scoring. I think we had two that scored 97s out of 1,000. I think we did 195 and 993, I think. So that tells you that, it tells you a lot. It tells you that all those cars were V8 Speed and Resto complete cars from start to finish, where they came in sometimes in boxes and they left show winners. So when we have the opportunity to work with a customer from the very beginning to the very end and plan everything and execute, the team scores, nearly perfect every time, which is an amazing tribute. And they've done it repeatedly.
That's huge. Man.
I'm gushing like the proud father here, but these guys deserve it totally.
Well, you should be. You should be.
Yeah, very, very fortunate. It's so great to see.
Yeah, I really liked it. One more thing that I got to do at the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals was I got to award the Kevin Ostie Celebrity Pick for the show.
And celebrity is in multiple sets of quotes.
Well, it was funny because when I got there Friday and Ben and I were walking around, I said, I probably need to get my credentials for the show. And he's like, oh, yeah, we'll go to the office and we'll get them. Or I went to some lady at the front gate of the entrance of the show. And I said, I need to get my credentials. And I gave him my name. Like, I don't have you here, hon. I'm like, oh, boy. All right. So we went to the office and happened to run across Bob. And we got it straightened out. It was still under your name. And because the lady behind the counter said, oh, is it a pick? And Bob says, yeah, it's a pick. It's like, oh, okay. I said, what's a pick? And she says, well, hon, I'm going to tell you. Yeah. See this? You take this and you put it on a car that you pick, that you think is the best car. I said, really?
Nice. Yeah. That's a heck of a responsibility.
This is going to be great.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I'm walking around the show on Friday, and I see this yellow car in the barn find section. And at first I thought, is that a Pantera? And I walked up and I got closer and there was a sign on it and it said AMC AMX3 prototype.
Yes.
Number one.
And
I'm like, this is a really cool car. And I'm looking around at it. I'm like, wow, that's really neat. And so I keep walking around the show, keep walking around the grounds there, and I got to do a celebrity pick. This is the real thing here. I got to do the right thing. So I'm walking around, and I see phenomenal cars all over the place. I can't get this AMX prototype out of my head. I said, that's it. I got to pick it. The next day, I went up to the show. I went to the two gentlemen who were presenting the car. I said, "Hey guys, I'm Mike. I'm Mike. I'm from V8 TV.
I'm an industry guy. Yeah.
I'm an industry guy, and I'm here to give you my celebrity pick." And they're like, "Holy cow, that's great!" And got their picture taken. And this car is amazing. It's a '69 AMC AMX Prototype 3, and there was about 9 of them made from AMX.
Okay.
They were never put into production. This car was purchased from AMC by a gentleman named Scotty Dawkins who worked for AMC.
Okay.
All he had to do was have it shipped from Italy for $400, and the car was his.
Really?
Really. He owned the car for a number of years, kept it on the down low, didn't want a whole lot of people knowing he had it, obviously, for security reasons. Unfortunately, in 2016, he passed away, and the car went to the family, and the family didn't really have the resources to restore the car. The car was pretty rough, so they sold it to a couple of guys named Michael Cicuti and Kyle Evans, and they're going to take this car, and they're going to restore it. So having it at the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals was like its last public showing before it gets restored.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And you can follow along with the restoration if you go to amx3.org.
Okay.
And there's also a Facebook page dedicated to it. AMC_AMX3 is the name of the group on Facebook, if you want to check that out.
Well, that car kills. And it's so great that you picked that, because that's probably what I would have picked anyway. Really.
I would hope so. I mean, you and I kind of think alike on some of these cars. And that car just really was such a departure from anything else that was there.
Yeah. Well, you truly absorbed my role there, because you stepped in to do the unveilings and the interviews, and you picked exactly what I would have grabbed. And the funny thing about that car, so you're right, it does look like a Pantera. I didn't know it was in Italy.
It was designed in Italy.
Yeah, it looks like it was,
for
sure.
Totally.
And so I guess all the prototypes were built in Italy, and then
I believe so, and then shipped out to the United States.
And it's very unusual for prototype cars to even get into the hands of consumers, right? Normally they all get crushed or put in a museum or something. So that's really cool. And I believe we had a little bit of a connection to that car a couple years ago when it went up for sale. If you're saying in 2016, that makes sense kind of on the time frame. Mm-hmm. Although I thought it might have been earlier than that. But anyway, there's still a couple of those things around. I think 3 still exist.
I think you're right on that, yeah.
So it might have been one of the others, but it was a yellow one, I thought. We have a customer, a guy that we did a lot of work on a 69 Mach 1 Mustang, and he lives in Elgin, Illinois. And when that car came up for sale, he sent me a message on it, and he's like, "You ever seen one of these before? Because I'm thinking about buying it." And I went, "Really? What is it?" And I learned a little bit about what the AMX3 was, and he was talking that if he got it at the right price and depending on what it needed, possibly sending it to our shop to have us do some work on it. So, that I've never seen the thing in person, but the idea had already been kind of entertained that we might have had the opportunity to do something on that car. So for you to walk in and go, "That's the car," that's really cool.
Yeah, that's like 6 degrees of separation, kind of weird. Yeah, it's kind of neat. Yeah, yeah, such a cool car. Kind of like Mach 5-ish in the front end, a little bit. Kind of reminds you of the Mach 5. Just a super sleek, just beyond its time car.
Well, it's a bummer that it never went into production, because I bet that's the kind of car that would have had other automakers kind of shaking in their boots, I think.
Well, funny you say that, because it actually did. There was in '71. This is the story that I was told to by Ian Dawkins, who was Scotty's son, who was at the show. That this prototype was driving on the streets in Detroit, and one of the Ford engineers saw it and freaked out.
I bet,
because they were working on the Pantera at the time, and they said, "Holy cow! AMC is going to scoop us on this. We have to get this Pantera released, and we have to get it released now."
Wow!
So they rushed it to production, and it was just full of problems. They all had to get recalled to be fixed, and it was just not a great release. All because of this car, this AMX3.
Wow! So the AMX3 moved Ford's needle to rush the Pantera to production. Yes. Wow, that's unbelievable. I'm wondering now if the Ford GTs, that were just kind of featured in the Ford versus Ferrari movie, created a public desire for that type of, mid-engine sports car. I wonder if that was part of the impetus for Ford to work with Di Tommaso on the Pantera and AMC to develop that thing, because, now all of a sudden there was this exotic car, supercar thing happening and racing.
That's a good point.
I would like to maybe research that and see if that had anything to do with those cars. And I don't know if there was any others, like GM. I think at that point, Chevrolet did show a mid-engine Corvette prototype.
Yeah, they did.
The Corvette Monza or something they called it. I don't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
And then there was the Lotus Europa, which had kind of that flat deck in the back. Bread wagon, they called it. But I wonder if there was any others. It's very interesting. I'll have to make some notes. Could be a good trivia question.
Hey now.
And speaking of which.
Hey, great segues today.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to back up just a second. Say thanks once again for stepping in and doing all that. I knew you were going to do just fine with it. I love the fact that it pushed you a little bit out of your comfort zone, because that's how we grow. That
is exactly how we grow.
And I love the fact that our team was able to manage the completion of a car and the unveiling and the delivery to the customer without Kelly and I, being the bosses, seeing it finished, right? So we didn't even see this thing finished to sign off on it, and they made it perfect and did it all on their own and made that sing. And the rest of our crew went up there to share in that experience. And you guys all got to eat good, so I'm a little jealous of that.
Right. Well, you got to come up a little more often, man.
I know. I guess everybody went to DiAgostino's Pizza and ate there. And then, of course, the Portillo's restaurant on the way home and on the way there. Everybody enjoyed that. So it sounded like a really great trip. So
it was a great trip. At the end, I was absolutely exhausted, however. But I was exhilarated and exhausted at the same time. A lot of walking, a lot of standing, a lot of doing. It was great, and I cannot thank you enough for thinking enough of me to put me into that role and help me grow and get me out of that comfort zone and do all that. It's dynamite.
Absolutely, man.
So thank you.
I said, there was no doubt in my mind that you were going to pull this off and help us look good and perpetuate what the V8 brand is all about. It's entertainment, it's quality work, it's people that care. So that's really cool. So thank you.
Right on.
And now let's get trivia questions wrong.
All righty. All right. Speaking of trivia questions. All right, Kevin, I asked you in the 1969 NASCAR season, what manufacturer lured Mr. the King away from Plymouth or from Chrysler, and what car did he race in the 69 season? And you said the Mercury Cyclone.
Yeah.
You were so close because it was Ford, but it was for the Torino Talladega.
Yeah. Damn near
so
the same
close.
car. Right.
Yeah,
So
damn near the same car.
I guess inside I would have wished it was a Mercury, but that's all good.
Yeah, right.
Missed it by that much. All right, well, speaking of missing it by that much.
Oh, no. I thought I was dead on this one.
Well, you really came super, super close. You had the question posed to you of what was the quickest production car of the 1980s. And being an egocentric American,
man,
you immediately thought that we were speaking of American cars only.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Well, the question was the quickest production car of the 1980s. You guessed the 1987 Buick GNX, which was a super quick car. You're right, 13s in the quarter off the showroom floor. But the Porsche 959 did 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds.
All-wheel drive.
All-wheel drive, twin turbo.
You suck. God dang it.
12,
you tricked me.
No, I didn't trick you. 12 flat in the quarter mile, and still one of the high benchmarks. So, yeah, GNX would have lost. But
I'm going to make a prediction here.
Uh-oh.
And our good friend Frank Simkowski plays along in the trivia questions in real time. I'm going to say he agrees with me on the GNX.
Well, he's got a GN. His son Frankie's got one, so yeah.
Correct.
I'm not taking anything away from the GNX, but this was an example of you got to listen to the question.
Yeah, right. Fine.
We're both losers once again.
I accept my defeat and protest.
Man. Well, I think that all worked out pretty well, considering that you're right. The GNX was a really killer car. So, and again, if that was an American I think that was the quickest American car, so you can have that.
I believe it was. I do remember hearing that in the 80s when the Grand National came out. It is the quickest production car available today in 1987.
Yeah.
So blew the Vette away, blew the Camaros away, blew everything away.
The King of the Hill ZR1 Corvette was right there with it. I think after the quarter mile, the Corvette was gone. But in the quarter
I would
mile,
agree with that.
The GNX was there. And, I would have thought you would have gone for the Turbo Trans Am.
What?
Yeah. Not the 80, the 89.
Oh, okay. I'm like, what? The 301 Turbo Trans Am?
No, the white pace car. The Indy pace car or anniversary edition with the 3.8 GNX driveline in it.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, the Buick is the first thing that came to mind, so that's what I went with.
There you go. Well, you can have that one.
Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, this was a great episode. Thank you again for your participation in MCACN and the great updates and the stories from it. I feel closer to have been there. I still miss going to that show, but that was the next best thing. And now the fun thing is I get to watch your work with Ben, and I get to be a spectator on Muscle Car of the Week, which was also a first because I've been directly involved with absolutely every single episode since day one. And I was involved with the ones that you guys shot, kind of picking the cars and getting some of the research.
Right.
But I wasn't there when they were shot, and that's never happened before. So it's fun to see those episodes the way the rest of the public sees them and be able to consume those. And one thing that I thought was fun, and I think you went back and saw this, that little Easter egg in that Hemi Daytona episode.
Yes.
Where
I did see that.
Did you see it? Yeah. So Ben used a video technique to extend the length of a shot by running the shot its full length and then rerunning it, but backwards. So instead of going from beginning to end, it went from beginning to end, then back to beginning. And it buys you more screen time. It allows you to stretch out a shot. The other way to do that is to digitally slow it down and extend it that way, but that often looks unnatural.
Okay.
But in this case, he didn't account for the reflection, and I think it's you in the reflection.
I think it is me.
Walking by the car, and then all of a sudden you walk backwards past the car.
Yeah, and then forward again. Like I do a little cha-cha-cha.
Like a Meow Mix commercial.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So I advise all of our listener to go back and watch that video, and you'll see a shot of the side of the car and Mike taking his little two-step back and forth.
Good Lord. That's beautiful.
We've gotten in a little bit of, not trouble, but people have picked up on that technique a couple of times. One time we were extending a shot and running it backwards, and I think it was just because the way the camera moved in the shot, it was visually more comfortable if the shot panned from left to right instead of right to left, with the sequence. And to do that, it got flipped in reverse. And way off in the distance, there's like a Volkswagen driving backwards down the street,
God dang it.
Yeah. And the other one was, there was a shot of a clock in a dashboard running backwards. And I think that was done for the same reason, because we did a pan of the dash and we had to flip it to make it match. But I think those are fun. I like to leave those in. I think it's fun when people find something, in the shot and go, hey, what's that? So those are pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
All right, my friend. Well, this was a lot of fun. We have to rely on a list now of all the places that you can find this show, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Which I don't have in front of me right now. Do you?
Oh, boy. I do. All right. You can find us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, V8Radio.com, as well as the V8 Radio Podcast Facebook page.
Wow. We have more places to listen than people listening.
Listening? How about that? Right on.
That's our new goal for next show. We need at least one listener on all channels.
Oh, that'd be beautiful.
That would. All right, I got to start calling relatives again.
You're right. We have listeners across multiple platforms. Yes, we do.
Yeah, right on. All right, man. Well, this is a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
You bet.
And we're going to do this again real soon. Go back through that list, play it again if you want to hear where we're at. You can subscribe to a lot of those. We hope you do. Or just check us out on the Facebook page. That's an easy one. And you can join Frank Simkowski with comments as the trivia questions play.
Yeah, don't let him have all the fun.
That's right.
Join in.
That's right. So for Mr. Mike Q-Ball Clarke, I'm Kevin Ostie, reminding you to keep the shiny side up, and we will talk at you next time on VA Radio.